Let me paint a picture you've almost certainly experienced. You're dating someone. You're in a relationship. She does something that rubs you the wrong way. Maybe it's the way she interacts with a particular guy friend. Maybe it's how she acts when she goes out without you. Maybe it's a comment she made that just didn't feel right. And you catch it. You sense it. That small knot in your stomach. That uneasy feeling, but you keep quiet. You convince yourself it's nothing serious. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You assume she should automatically understand that this crosses a line. Time goes by. Weeks go by. She repeats the behavior again and again. And every time, that knot tightens just a little more. Resentment starts stacking up. You begin replaying moments in your head, keeping a silent tally. Yet you still don't speak up. You're a good guy. You don't want to come off as controlling. You don't want drama, so you push it down. You tolerate it. You wait. You hope she'll magically realize you're unhappy without you ever having to say it out loud. Then eventually, maybe she does it once more. Maybe it's something minor that sets it off. And you snap. Everything you've been holding in spills out at once. You're furious. You're blaming. You're bringing up things that happened months ago. And she stares at you like you've completely lost it. Because from her point of view, everything was perfectly fine until right now. She didn't know you were upset. You never said anything. And suddenly, you're the unreasonable one. You're the one who went too far. You're the one saying sorry before the night ends. Does that sound familiar? This is the pattern most men repeat. Quiet frustration, then an outburst, then an apology. And it wrecks relationships. It kills respect. It eats away at you. Today, we're going to break down how to actually set boundaries with a woman. Not abstract ideas, but real-world execution. How to express what you will and will not accept without it blowing back on you. How to define your terms early so you never reach the breaking point later. Let's dive in. First, we need to understand why men fail at this over and over again. It comes from a basic misunderstanding of how women interpret information. Men operate through direct communication. If something is wrong, you say it's wrong. If nothing is said, then everything is fine. Clear, straightforward, rational. But women function on a different frequency. Women are always reading signals. They notice tone, body language, context, behavioral patterns. They constantly forming an internal map of what is acceptable to you based on countless small cues. And here's the crucial part. Silence itself is a message. When she does something and you say nothing, she doesn't assume you're quietly uncomfortable. She assumes you're okay with it. Your inaction signals acceptance. Your tolerance signals approval. Every time you ignore something without reacting, you're clearly telling her that this behavior is allowed. You're defining a boundary whether you're aware of it or not. And the boundary you're defining is, there are no boundaries. That's why your eventual blow-up feels unfair to her. For months, you've been signaling that everything is fine. You've been endorsing her behavior through silence. Then out of nowhere, you change the rules and accuse her of crossing lines she never knew existed. From her perspective, that doesn't make her entirely wrong. So here's the first rule. Boundaries have to be set early, not after she's crossed them dozens of times, not after resentment has piled up. Early, ideally before the relationship turns serious. The first few weeks and months of dating are when she's gathering data about you. She's learning what kind of man you are, what you allow, what you reject, what draws you closer, what makes you pull away. She's testing, whether intentionally or unconsciously. And this is your opportunity. This is when you show, through your words, your reactions, your stories, and your behavior, exactly what kind of relationship you're agreeing to. If you missed that early window, you can still put boundaries in place later, but it becomes far more difficult because now you're no longer setting expectations, you're renegotiating them. And renegotiation almost always creates friction. Let me make this concrete with an example. Imagine you the type of man who isn't comfortable with your girlfriend having close male friends that she texts all the time and meets one-on-one for coffee. You're allowed to feel that way. Some men genuinely don't care. You do. Neither stance is objectively right or wrong. It's simply about what works for you. Now, the wrong way to deal with this is to stay silent. Hope she somehow reads your thoughts, quietly stew every time she mentions getting lunch with Jake, and then 6 months later, during an argument about something unrelated, suddenly blow up and accuse her of always being with that guy and being disrespectful. That's the explosion pattern. It makes you appear insecure, controlling, and emotionally unstable all at the same time. The correct approach is to communicate your values early, indirectly, before it ever turns into a problem. Maybe you're texting early on and she casually mentions a male friend. You don't attack her. You don't grill her with questions. You simply share a viewpoint. You might say something like, "Yeah, I've never really been a fan of close opposite-sex friendships once I am in a relationship. I've just seen it create issues, but everyone's different." That's it. Relaxed, non-accusatory, just a glimpse into how you see the world. What did you just do? You planted a marker. You told her, calmly and without confrontation, that this is part of your value system. Now she has clarity. Now she can decide, before she's deeply invested, whether she's compatible with that. If she's a woman who highly prioritizes those friendships, she may choose to step away on her own. Good. She wasn't right for you anyway. If she's adaptable, she'll naturally adjust because she understands where you stand. Either result is far better than bottling resentment and eventually exploding. This method, expressing boundaries through stories, perspectives, and casual disclosures instead of direct confrontation, is extremely effective. You're not instructing her on what to do. You're revealing who you are. You're offering information and allowing her to decide what to do with it. This maintains her sense of autonomy while still establishing your frame. She doesn't feel restricted. She feels informed. Here's another scenario. Say she wants to take a girl's trip to a heavy party destination. You're uncomfortable with that. The wrong move is to say nothing, act subtly off about it, then either agree while feeling resentful or outright forbid it and come across as controlling. Both outcomes are bad. A better option is to share your perspective naturally when travel or partying comes up early in conversation. I've always been pretty traditional about that kind of stuff. When I'm with someone, I'm not really into separate party vacations. It's just not my thing. You've communicated a value. You haven't given an order. If she aligns with that value, great. If she doesn't, you'll learn that now, before emotional attachment deepens. Notice what you're not doing. You're not waiting until she has already booked a trip to Cancun and then trying to shut it down. You're not engaging in a dramatic argument about trust and respect. You're casually setting expectations as part of getting to know each other. The boundary is in place before it's ever challenged. Now let's address what happens when boundaries are crossed despite your best intentions. Because it will happen. Maybe she didn't take your early signals seriously. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she's testing whether you really meant what you said. Whatever the cause, she does something that crosses a line you've already established. This is where most men mess up again. They either explode, which we've already covered, or they initiate a long, heavy conversation about respect, boundaries, and how hurt they feel. And while serious talks are sometimes necessary, they often backfire. They make you look weak. They make you seem like you're seeking her approval. They place her in a position where she gets to decide whether to give you what you want or not. You become the one asking. There's a better option: strategic distance. When a boundary is crossed, you don't lose control. You don't deliver a lecture. You simply reduce availability. You pull back emotionally. You're not hostile or icy. You're just busy, engaged elsewhere, and a bit less warm than usual. You create space. A gap forms. And this works because women are extremely sensitive to emotional distance. She'll pick up on it. She'll feel the change and start wondering what shifted. In many cases, she'll know exactly what caused it. She'll connect the distance to the action she took. And now the choice is hers. She can close that gap by adjusting her behavior, or she can allow the distance to widen. You haven't forced anything. You haven't controlled her. You've simply communicated information through your response, and you've shown that your approval depends on how you're treated. Let me be very clear about what this is not. This is not the silent treatment used as punishment. This is not manipulation. This is cause and effect. When someone does something that undermines your trust or makes you uncomfortable, it's natural to feel less connected to them. You're not fabricating distance. You're just not concealing it. You're not acting like everything is fine when it isn't. You're allowing your true emotional state to be visible. And here's the important part. You do this calmly, without drama, without blame, without turning it into a discussion. Unless she brings it up. If she asks what's going on, you keep it simple and honest. I wasn't comfortable with how that played out. I'm just thinking it through. That's it. No long explanations. No 2-hour breakdowns. You've said what needed to be said. Now you observe what comes next. Does she brush off how you feel? Does she become defensive? Or does she try to understand and fix the situation? Her reaction gives you all the information you need. Now let's address a major mistake men make. Trying to change women. This is everywhere. A man meets a woman who is clearly misaligned with his values. She goes out partying every weekend. She has dozens of male attention seekers in her Instagram orbit. She's been in multiple relationships in a short span, and he tells himself, I really like her. I'll just set boundaries and she'll change. No, she won't. Not for you. Not because you asked politely. Not because you explained your emotions. Women don't alter their core lifestyle because a man requests it. They change only when they decide to change, and that decision comes from within, not from relationship negotiations. This is where selection becomes essential. Boundaries aren't tools for remodeling incompatible people. Boundaries are filters that help you identify compatible ones. When your boundaries are clear from the beginning, women who won't respect them naturally fall away. You draw in women who already align with your values. This filtering happens automatically when you're honest about who you are. But many men do the opposite. They hide their standards to appeal to more women. They act more laid back than they really are because they're afraid of turning women off. And then they end up involved with women who are fundamentally incompatible, trying to bolt boundaries onto relationships that were built on misrepresentation. That leads straight to frustration. Here's a useful reframe. Think of yourself as the employer, not the applicant. When you're hiring, you have requirements. You have standards. You evaluate candidates based on whether they meet your needs. You don't hire someone who's unqualified and then hope to train them into competence. You choose someone who already fits. Dating works the same way. You have criteria for the relationship you want and the woman who fits into your life. Your role is to assess whether someone meets those standards, not to plead for acceptance, not to prove your worth, but to decide if she qualifies. This shift in mindset changes everything. You stop pursuing and start choosing. You stop waiting for her to become someone else and start paying attention to whether she already fits into your life. Now let me clear up something that confuses a lot of men. The difference between boundaries and control. Boundaries are about you. They define what you will and won't accept in your life and what kinds of behavior you're willing to be around. Control, on the other hand, is about her, trying to dictate what she does, where she goes, and who she talks to. On the surface, these can look similar, but in reality, they're completely different. A boundary sounds like this. I am not comfortable being in a relationship where my partner does X. If X happens, I'll have to rethink the relationship. That statement is about your choices. Control sounds like this. You're not allowed to do X because I say so. That's about dominating her actions. The first approach is healthy. The second is toxic. Here's the real-world difference. Boundaries come with consequences that you apply to yourself. If she crosses the line, you pull back. You leave. You end the relationship. You don't force her to comply. You simply remove yourself from a situation that no longer works for you. Control tries to force compliance without you having to make hard decisions. You want her behavior to change, but you don't want to walk away if it doesn't. So you pressure her, guilt her, or manipulate her into doing what you want while you stay. That isn't boundaries. That's coercion. A man with real boundaries says, this is what I accept. If you can't meet that, then we're not compatible. No resentment, but I'll move on. That man earns respect. Even if she doesn't agree with his standards, she respects that he has them and enforces them. A man without real boundaries sounds like this. I don't like when you do that. Please stop. Then it happens again. Please stop. Eventually. Fine. I'll just be upset. That man isn't respected. At best, he's a nag. At worst, he's a doormat. Let me give you another practical example. Social media behavior. Suppose you're not comfortable with your girlfriend posting thirst traps or flirting with other men in comment sections. You're allowed to feel that way. Some men don't care. You do. The wrong move is to wait until she posts something provocative and then start an argument. Question who the guys commenting are. Dig through her DMs. That's controlling behavior, and it will poison the relationship. The right move is to establish early what kind of relationship you want. I'm pretty traditional when it comes to relationships. I'm not into chasing online validation for either of us. Once you're committed, that energy should be directed toward each other. You've expressed a value. You've included yourself in the expectation. You're not singling her out. You're describing the kind of relationship you want to be in. If she's someone who bases a lot of her self-worth on Instagram attention, she'll likely decide you're not compatible. Good. She's correct. It's better to learn that now than 6 months later when you re-arguing over bikini photos. But if she agrees with that value, she'll respect that you have standards, and alignment will happen naturally because you selected for compatibility instead of hoping she would change. Here's something many men don't grasp about female psychology. Women respect men who have standards. Even if they don't meet those standards themselves, even if they initially push back against them, there is something attractive about a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to state it. Why? Because it signals strength. It signals options. It signals that he doesn't need to accept whatever is offered. A man who tolerates everything is a man without choices. A man who tolerates only certain things is a man who can afford to be selective, and selectivity implies value. On the flip side, men without standards aren't attractive. The man who agrees to everything, accepts any treatment, and bends to every demand may seem agreeable, but he isn't respected because his approval carries no weight. He would approve of anyone. His acceptance has no value because it's given freely to all. Your standards are what make your acceptance meaningful. When a woman meets your standards, she feels like she's earned something. She feels chosen by someone who doesn't choose everyone. That feeling is very different from being accepted by someone who would accept anyone. Now let's move into how to handle conflicts when they do arise. Not every boundary issue can be solved through subtle cues and pulling back slightly. Sometimes a direct conversation is necessary, but the way you handle that conversation makes all the difference. First rule, remain calm. The second you become emotional, angry, defensive, accusatory, or pleading, you've already lost. You've shown that her behavior has rattled you. You've handed her leverage. Now she's dealing with your emotions instead of reflecting on her actions. Calmness is strength. Calm communicates, I'm not threatened by this. I'm addressing it because I choose to, not because I'm needy or desperate. Second rule, keep it short. Men often think they need to explain every detail, justify their feelings, and present a case for why they're upset. That's a mistake. Over-explaining signals weakness. It's asking for permission to feel the way you feel. State your position once, clearly, and then stop talking. I wasn't okay with what happened. I need you to understand that. Then be quiet. Let the silence do its work. Let her respond. Don't keep talking to fill the space. Third rule, don't apologize for having standards. Men frequently sabotage their own boundaries with phrases like, I know this sounds controlling, or I don't want to be that guy, but stop doing that. You're apologizing before you've even stated your position. You're undermining yourself before the conversation begins. State your standard plainly. If it's reasonable, it doesn't require an apology. Fourth rule, be willing to walk away. This is the foundation beneath every real boundary. If you're not prepared to leave, you don't have boundaries, you have requests. And requests can be rejected. A boundary without consequences is just background noise. She has to believe, and you have to genuinely mean, that if this doesn't change, you will exit the relationship. Not as a threat, just as a fact of life. Now let me clarify something important. Not every issue needs confrontation. Some situations are better handled through calibration rather than conversation. You notice something small. It bothers you. Instead of sitting her down for a serious talk, you simply become a little less available, a little less warm. You observe how she responds. If she picks up on it and adjusts her behavior on her own, that's a good sign. The system is working. No conversation required. This is how healthy relationships actually function. Most of the time, both people are constantly reading each other, adjusting, recalibrating. It's a dance. The rhythm changes, the steps shift. Most of this happens beneath conscious discussion. It's felt rather than spoken. Problems arise when one person stops reading the signals. When she's doing something that bothers you, you're pulling back, and she either doesn't notice or doesn't care. That's when you escalate to a conversation. But conversation should be escalation, not the first move. Try calibration first. Many issues resolve themselves without a single direct word ever being said. Now let me condense all of this into a framework you can actually apply. Step 1. Know your values before you start dating. What do you accept? What do you refuse? What are your non-negotiables? Get clear on these independently of any woman. Write them down if you need to.